All right. So yesterday we looked at building an application with the application hub. We defined a couple sections, pages for those sections. We looked at the different templates that you can have for pages to build within the Freedom Designer to give you a starting point that you can then put fields on. Looked at some more components that you can add to those pages because there's seriously so many, and I highly recommend playing around with them to figure out what they all do and where you can put them. My thoughts today was to take the sections that we made yesterday and start building off of them to create both dynamic cases and some business processes. So we'll look at the two main ways that you can manage workflow in your application, because we've got pages to store data. Now we need to do some workflow with the data. And you should be able to see our learning material section that we made yesterday. Everybody see it? All right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
nice. All right, so I'm here in the list view of the section, and what we're going to do first is make a dynamic case. And the dynamic case is a set of stages that can go across the top of the page in essentially like colored bars. So it's like a progress bar. So I'm going to go into the editor, and I just wanted to take a moment to go over again that in the older designers, to the point of keeping straight, because it's a change. Normally, you would have a button up here to go to the section wizard, and you do edit pages by clicking this tiny gear up here in the right corner. But if I do it from the list page, it will take me to the list page editor, not to the edit page. That's just for anybody that's watching these videos that's played around with the old wizard. It's good to get in your brain that you actually have to go to the page you want to edit, and then it'll open the editor, rather than having a section wizard that you would go through and see like the list view and then to the pages and then manage everything there. So that's not where I want to be. But I'm going to click on this record to open it, and I'll go to our edit page screen, and I'm going to open this editor. And so there's two things that we need to have in order to set up this dynamic case. The main thing that we need is stages, and it's something we didn't add yesterday. So we need a set of stages for the dynamic case to progress through, something like planned, in progress, finalized, completed, something like that. So I'm thinking, let's do some stages here, and I'm going to do a drop down lookup, and I'll call it, for our learning material, just call it material stage. Oops, if I can capitalize correctly. Material stage. I'm going to make a new lookup. And then I think because we're going to need to add values to this so that we can build stages, I'm going to enable adding new values in this lookup. Though it does need a page, I think. So I might have to go to the section list anyway. But enable opening record list. Yeah, that all looks good. So I'm going to save the stages, and then I'm going to put in the page element that controls the dynamic case so that we can get started with that. We just need to add a field to the object that is going to store the stages that we'll use. As you'll see in a second, when I start setting up the dynamic case, we'll have to tell it what column we want to use. And Creatio's going to tell me again about that data binding with context that we saw the other day, which I'll go check once we're done on the call. That's just a package cleanup if I'm going to submit to the marketplace. So that's saved. I'm going to do this progress bar element here. Yeah. So it's kind of got these chevrons. And I'm going to drag it up here and just close feed so I've got some more space. And then I'll have this progress bar at the top here. And it's gonna ask what the or what the data source should be to build these stages. And then I'm going to have to click to set up cases. And then it's going to open a new screen, which a lot of this UI for anybody that has used the older section wizards should look familiar. This UI itself hasn't changed too much. So what I'm going to do is right now I've got no cases. You can see it says the section has no records. And first thing I need to do is which column to build the stages by. So where should Creatio look to learn what my stages are? Material stage. Then there's this other setting here, which column determines which case to use with a record. That's something you can have one case for one record. Maybe you have, like, say, documents, and you just want a really simple flow that is draft, send for approval, maybe have a review option, and then it's published. And that's just all your documents. You want it really templated, you want it really simple, no variants. But maybe you've got different types of documents that, like, you've got maybe like meeting minutes that are really, really simple. And it's just maybe like draft and then maybe clean up. I don't know. Maybe like you want to go after your notes and clean up the meeting minutes before you send them. But then you could also have like NDAs or maybe more official documents that they may have more stages they have to go through. Like meeting minutes don't really need too much, but maybe an NDA needs like draft, review, sign, agree, like several different stages and a completely different set of steps. You can have under this which column determines which case to use with a record. You could use a field like like in our case it's a material type, but you just have you have a type or a category that you can say that is going to determine what is a different case essentially. So when I put that in on a material type, and then I'm going to save just to tell Creatio this is how I'm building my dynamic cases. Applied successfully, and then I'm going to make a new case. And then while this is loading, I'm going to go into my user-facing screen because we will need to go and add values to the stages. As of right now, we don't. That dropdown, we just created it. There's nothing in it. So I'm going to go up into this workspace to the studio workspace, which is for configurators. And you usually get like that's where if I click on this, you'll see that there's the process library, which we'll look at in a little bit, process log, which check with, we'll talk about with the process library, your system users, who's got to log in, what their password is, should you set them to reset their password on the next login. System settings will hold kind of attributes like their settings really, but they can control things from if you have the auto number generation that we were looking at for like the material -0001, that there's a system setting that will store what was the last number and what that prefix should be, that material value. System settings also have where you can set like password rules as to like how many capital letters, how many lowercase letters, how many symbols and numbers. Those are all in system settings. But for now, we're going to go to lookups, which lookups is where you can, at a base level, view the records in any object in the database. If it's not included in the lookup section, you can make a reference to it, like accounts to contacts. But lookups is where you can add values to your dropdowns. So because I saved it in the wizard, it should exist. I did call it my material type. Okay, so here's my type, which I'm just going to say like, what kind of types do we want? Maybe a presentation, and then maybe like self-guided, just to give us some options we can work with. And then under stages, we want maybe, we'll maybe do like plan, draft, review, a couple stages like that. But I'm just going to have this open for now. I'm going to go back to our page where we were setting up cases. And pop-ups were blocked. I do want to allow pop-ups on this, and so that it'll open a new page for us where we can start building. So this is the dynamic case builder. And you can see it'll default with just a standard name, one stage. Over here on the right, we've got the section it's attached to, what the stage column is that we're using. If I wanted to put in a description, I can to say like, this is an example. My descriptions are always really great. Showing how to do things. Then here's where we can set to use this case with records where. And for now, I can actually just say I want to use it for all of the types. I don't want a different dynamic case. I just want to use the same one. And so maybe I'll call this material alt flow. And so now I'm going to click on this first stage, and it's going to bring me this green panel on the right side, where you can see it says stage value in the lookup. That's the stages lookup that we told it should get stages from, that as of right now doesn't have anything in it because we haven't filled the stage, which is why I have that lookup open to make it easier to add them. So if I go in here, let's do maybe like plan, review, approve, analyze. I think I'm doing more kind of document ones, but learning materials kind of not too far off from documents. And do something like maybe we do some planning for what this material should entail, then maybe we review it a bit and we send it to an approval, be approved by a manager, like, is this any good, or do I need to change it? We maybe make some finalizing changes, and because I added a name here. But after we finalize, then we're going to close it out. And usually the way I always tend to finish these is closed, and then dash how it was closed. And try like, so closed, published, and then closed, not published. So that visually the closed stages are my last ones. Like if I've got closed in the name, that should be the end. And then published versus not published is my success versus failure. Maybe we like canceled the material for whatever reason. You can have as many stages as you want here, but I just want to kind of get some that we can start with. And so if I go back to my dynamic case, I am going to have to refresh it so that Creatio can get up-to-date lookup values. But one of the things that's handy in the dynamic case builder and the process builder that we'll look at later. And you see this, like because I refreshed it, I didn't save my name reset, my type reset. But Creatio did actually cache that I had made some changes. So if I hit load, it'll actually bring back what I had done. It kind of has like when Word closes unexpectedly and gives you sometimes the chance to recover files. It's a little like that. So yeah. Now I'm back with the stages. I can start adding them. And what I have to do is I'll do plan first. And I'm just going to go through and put them all on first. So let's do plan, maybe review, approve, just keep clicking the plus to add more stages, finalize, close published, and then close not published. So I've got my beginning to end kind of sequential steps that need to be done. Now I can start getting a little fancy to try to make these visually clear to my users. And one of the first things I can do, if I click close not published, there you'll see that there is possible next stages and possible previous stages. Creatio, as you're building these, will by default assume you want to be able to go to any other stage. But as you're building these out and you're refining them, you can trim those stages for validation so that your users can't skip around, because in most use cases, there's probably situations where you don't want to have a stage be skippable. Like, say, like if you have an approval, you wouldn't want a user to be able to go just like planned, review, published, and just skip any managerial oversight on it. So you can block the stages so that they don't, that you just remove those as next valid options. When I'm starting with a workflow like this, I usually leave it more open. And then as I go through and I refine it and I do testing for elements within it, I'll start to trim it down as I know the pieces that I put into the finalized stage, those are working as intended. Now I can lock them down, because I'll show you in a second, you can put parts in it, like things to do in the finalized stage. But when I'm testing, I like to be able to go like finalize, oh, it didn't trigger correctly, approve, relaunch the elements in it. But if I close the stages, I can't do that. So, yeah. So that's what the possible next stages and possible previous stages are for. There's the automatic transition to next case stage that you can trigger just manually, just by the user clicking the stages, and make that the only way to move. You can also have it that if required steps are completed, so there may be some optional stuff that if those steps aren't done, but the required ones are, you advance, or you make it that everything needs to be completed and then it can automatically advance. Down here, though, this is the one I want, the setting I want, the group with another stage, because right now it looks like in a sequential order that these all come one after another. But closed not successful doesn't come closed like after closed success. It's a one or the other kind of situation. So what I can do is group with another stage, and then because this is my not successful stage, I'll uncheck stage is successful. And then you'll notice the chevron kind of like arrow thing, this like arrow indent goes away and it becomes a straight line. And what that will do, if I save this, just to give you the idea, I'll be able to go back and refresh our section page. We'll put the two on top of each other. So that's saved. Let me go back to Bootcamp workspace, learning material. I'll open our record. We'll most likely need to refresh it. And our progress bar should show up. Oh, no, it's not, because I didn't put a type in. Oh, I know you want to, Creatio. Let me try resaving that page just to make sure everything's up to date on changes we made. There we go. Now it's showing up. I had added the dynamic case progress bar to our edit page, but when I went to go set up cases, I didn't save the page, so I hadn't told Creatio I wanted it there. But there we go. There's our stages. And then you'll notice down here, close published is stacked with close not published. So that's the beginnings of my dynamic case. And if I wanted it to be just progress steps, that's all I need to do. It's just visually how far along is this bar. And then one of the neat things in the Freedom UI, if I go back to the list view, and then I'll have to add the column for material stage, is the stages can have a little progress bar to show how full they are as elements are moving down the workflow. So that's the starting point. That's our dynamic cases in existence. If we wanted to, if I go back to the screen, I can make this even nicer because I just like to play with the colors sometimes to try to be more visually friendly to users. That I can say change not published because it's not successful. I can make it red, and then the closed published maybe be like a darker green so that they stand out in this workflow. And this is what I usually do when we configure. I do green all the way and a darker green for final success and then red for not successful. One of the things that is kind of nice that you can do though, if you want to try to, depends on the level of involvement you want to get in terms of visual clarity, but say I do the first stage is like a blue, and then I could do maybe like a teal kind of color and try to do from the color swatches a little bit of a blend almost from like blue to green. I don't know if that fully reads as a blue to green, but you could do the different shades if you wanted to. I could really get into like a really light green that then gets more solid as it goes along. But yeah, that's up to you in design and what's going to be clear to your users. And part of the reason why I like doing different colors for the stages, if it's beneficial to the users, when you get back to the list view, if I refresh this, you can have at a glance in your list of records, all you have to do is see what color is there. If it's the blue color, then you can know, oh, that's where we're at. But if it's more green, you can see that you're further along. So that's up to you on how much you would want to use. The tools are there to enable it. But so then we have our stages. But that's not all the dynamic case can do. You can see these pieces underneath it where it says there's a little flag and it says add step. The dynamic case is really good for building a set of tasks and activities that you need to do at each stage, like as the person working a record. So like say that if you're doing cases, you need to maybe fire off certain emails. If you're doing like onboarding of an employee, maybe there's different interviews you have to do at different points. That like you have an interview stage where you have to ask them certain questions, and then maybe there's the like decision on whether you're going to hire them or not that you can have like send acceptance letter, like however you would like whatever you need to do at those stages. And so maybe plan. We need to have design material. We need to figure out what our learning material is going to be. And with this blue flag, I've made a task. It's kind of a little to-do check mark that goes into Creatio's activity section and will get generated for the person working the record to complete. Creatio is going to put in what should be done and give it a title. Just because I typed design material, Creatio has tried to generate this record for me. It's called it design material, what should be done, I should design material, and then who should perform the task, and then it's defaulted into the current user contact. I think as we're moving into dynamic cases and processes, this is an important thing to be aware of, that there are several system variables. There's like current date, current time, that will at the point of that element triggering, go and ask Creatio what is today, what is the time, so that you can set essentially a flexible variable as to what is the time when you're running that process. The current user contact is a variable for if I trigger this stage, the person that you should assign to do the task essentially is the person who set the stage, as like the current user. If it's a business process, it's going to be the person that hit the run button. It's just, if this is triggering, whoever triggered it should be the one to do it. But I can actually clear this if I wanted to and say pull from our main record column. There's a couple options in this lightning bolt. That there's the main record column, which would be to pull from our learning material record. So we set a manager on the record. For example, you could say main record column, the material manager should do this task, which I feel like that kind of makes some sense. You could also pull from a related object. So if say there was an organization that was connected to this record, like an account that was considered a provider of the material, you could assign that account's primary contact essentially to do it through making steps in related objects to go like I could do related objects created by, and then now I'm in a contact record. I could say that contact's account and go through their related object to get their primary contact. You can make steps to other records and get the information there. Is the main thing I'm trying to show. Other options, you can do an element parameter. So say I've gone through each of these stages and I've got like 4 or 5 different pieces that are active, different tasks, different pages that need to be fired. Maybe there's a stage that, maybe when we set this up initially and create a material record, we don't have a manager. Maybe the first thing we have to do is assign a manager. And then so what we can do is have as a parameter on the design material, because at that point we want the manager to do it, I can use an element parameter to retrieve from the design material, or not design material, from assigned material manager, who's assigned in that step. So that way the dynamic case is able to pull from the other elements in its workflow and essentially react to decisions that are made along the process. I could also do a lookup value, just hard code it, just say that Jim in accounting, he's going to do it every time. That's probably not what you want to do in this case. That's kind of a rigid way to set it up, but the option is there. There's that current user contact variable. Or you could go to a system setting. Maybe there's a system setting that you defined as like an accounting user. I don't know what, like, I can't really see it, a good use case for it, but that's kind of the idea that you have with system setting, at least with a contact. And then a formula doesn't really work in this case, but the formulas allow you to do some logic behind them. So if it doesn't really work with the contact, but just to give you an idea, to say that I needed a text field, but I had an integer, I could pass it to a string in the formula. So that I could assign, essentially adapt a parameter to the parameter I needed it in, but in a different format. That's probably not a little more complicated, but that's there. I could set the type of task, can connect it to different records. And then the main thing that I should cover with dynamic cases, because I want to move on to processes before we run out of time, is that you can have, when is the step performed? Is it at the start of the stage, the moment we move into plan? Or if we're doing something like I was saying, that you have to assign a material manager and then the material manager is the one that designs the material, you could say after the previous step is complete, and what's that previous step? Assign material manager. And then is it optional or required? So you can build out quite a lot of options in here. I'm going to get rid of that error message and just do current user contact again. At each stage, you can do a blue flag task, which is just a to-do, just like a checklist. Just say this needs to be done. Is it done? You can do an approval. So like, I'm putting this in the wrong stage. This should probably be in the approve stage, but you can choose a given user, maybe by the record. You maybe have like material approved, or that you can say that you want to send this record to be approved by somebody. It's not a legally binding kind of agreement, but it's a way to have a record in the system that says Joe saw it and Joe said it was good. So if somebody higher up doesn't like it, Joe gave it the thumbs up. It's kind of a way to record that somebody has attested that they approved or rejected something. Change access rights if, say, maybe after approval you needed to like lock down the record, like it goes into finalize and you have a certain person that needs to enter it into another like a website. Maybe we've approved the material, now we have to make it available on our website. You can restrict access to the record so that only a certain user can now make changes to it. You can send emails. Like if you want to send out an email after the approval that can say like, hey, this was approved. You can assign a template email, have a custom email maybe, choose an inbox that the mail comes from, and just automatically or manually send the email. You can open an edit page. So maybe at a certain stage, you need to like create like a document. Maybe spell document correctly. You can say that we need to create a document. You specify the kind of page you want to open, who performs it, are they adding a new record or editing the existing record, and then you can also set default values for that record. So like if logically there's an account on learning material that you want to set on the document, you can pass those values through. And then the last one, which will connect into us looking at the process library, is run a subprocess. The previous elements I looked at, those are all built to run in a dynamic case natively out of the box, that they're just ready to go, that you can use them. They're also sometimes a little limited. Like open edit page just does a new record in that one page. If you wanted to do anything fancier, it's kind of limited by its options. But the subprocess is you can run a business process that I'm going to go start in the process library. And so for now, just keep in your mind that if you don't see something that you need to do in the dynamic case that these pieces alone cannot handle, you can try to build it as a business process and then just trigger the business process in the dynamic case. Any questions on that before I move on?
None at the moment.
All right, so I'm just going to save that. Creatio is going to try to let me clear some of these out because it's going to throw an error. Yeah, because Creatio will try to validate to make sure I've connected all the pieces correctly, and I didn't connect almost any of those correctly because I was trying to show you that they were there. All right, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to close that. And the form page, I'm going to close some of these just to create some space. And that was the process library. But so now we'll look at business processes, where the dynamic cases for that step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of logic. The business process is a little more for running at you push a button and it can do if this, then do that. Yeah, or if these 3 things are true, then do that. Yeah, so if I click Studio, we're going to go to the process library. The process library is where you can see the list of business processes. Like there's tons in here that will perform some kind of function in the system. That either you push them on a button to say like this one here is a UI switcher for users that want to toggle the classic UI to the freedom UI. I think there's just a system setting, if I remember correctly, that controls that. But Creatio built a page here for UI management that just has a button that you can click and tries to make it a little more user friendly. You can have things from like opportunities that convert lead into an opportunity. Some of these ones with the green circles next to them, those are by the triangles are by signal. Meaning they start on some kind of system criteria, like an opportunity was added or a product was marked as ready to sell, or like somebody made some change to a piece of data on a record and the process was set to go like, oh, it's my time to run. And you can see a little bit of that process because I accidentally clicked on it. The green circles with the clocks, that's on a timer. So say you want to run it like every morning at 7 a.m. to update a value. Like I think one of the out of the box ones the Creatio's got is for birthdays. They have the option, you can store a birthday for a user, and so there's a process that runs really early in the morning that just goes through all of the contacts and says, okay, the contact was born on this day. What's today? Should we update their age? Because is it their birthday or not? That's really all it is. It's just doing a little bit of a calculation, but that runs on a timer to check it daily rather than anytime somebody like clicks on birthday to like slightly change it on the contact record. It's just a bulk adjustment for the next day. The log is where you can see how it's like task manager essentially for your business processes. You can see what process ran. If you want, for reference, you can see the package, who ran it. This is my trial, so it's going to be that I ran all of them, and also I'm filtered to see only the ones that I started. But there's a lot that I'll have run in here. The process status. So these are all completed successfully. And by successfully, that means the process didn't error during its run. That does not mean that it didn't do something that you didn't want it to do. It got to where it thinks it was done. Just for reference in troubleshooting, the start date and then the end date of when it ran, so you could see if it was the like running still. You could see that how long has it been running. There's some canceled error. If you find an error, you can actually click on it to see the report, but you can open any one of these and it'll tell you elements that triggered within and give you a little more information. Well, let's look at the process library and let's make a new process. So when you make a new process, it's going to start you with this really simple canvas with a start and then a terminate and a line between them. That's the main two pieces really that any business process needs. It needs to know when it's starting and when it's ending. On this right side here, you can have your settings, which similar to how it was with the dynamic case, you can see a code name, a version, so you can do a little bit of version control in the system to save new versions of a process that maybe you're making changes to. And then down here where it says active, you can have your new version be inactive until you're actually ready for it to be active and available for workflow usage. The only other thing I really want to point out here is this maximum number of repetitions. It is possible to build, say, a process that circles back in itself. If you have like an if statement, then do this, and then it goes back to the original branch, and the if continues to be true, it'll kind of just start going in a circle. And you don't really want that because it'll become a resource hog and slow down the whole instance. And so the process comes default with a tap that if it finds an element has been triggered 100 times, meaning that the circles come back to the same place to fire the same element more than once. If it gets up to 100, the process will automatically shut itself down to avoid it continuing to circle endlessly. Let's see. So I'm going to start adding some pieces to this process. So on this left side is my toolbar that I've got of elements that I can add. There is some selection tools. There's like the simple select. If I want to just pick on one element, I can do essentially the click and drag to pick up more than one. This box here, this circle or like this kind of rounded square thing, I guess, with nothing in it. These are user interaction tasks. So anything in here prompts the user in some form to do something, like perform tasks. This is similar to how it was in the dynamic case. You can prompt to do a simple task that's just design material. But that has to prompt the user to say, is this done or not? Like they're going to get the screen about doing this to do. The under here, open edit page, the user has to fill out the record, like the record you prompted them to. If you say create a new document, this page will says like, well, I don't have all the information. You please provide some more. The send email approval, like all of these involve the user doing something in order for this element to be able to complete and move down the flow. The rounded square thing, my brain keeps wanting to say it's a circle. It's not. It's a square, but it's got like this magic wand in it. These are all system actions. They don't prompt the user to do things. So like read data, that's a call to the database to get a record. This is the user does not have to be involved in this element though. Creatio can just do it. You tell it, read first record from the selection. I want you to read a record from accounts, and I want you to filter it by say type. The account type equals customer. That is going to get one record from count. It's not going to ask me, the user, for any further information. And it's going to come back with the first account that fits the criteria of type equals customer, which that's obviously going to be more than one. So I could further refine the criteria if there's a specific record I want. But if I put that on the process flow, that's all. Like the user will not be asked, but Creatio will start, get the read element, and then it'll terminate. There's add data, so like add, modify, delete. You know, your usual data interactions that you can have the system do. Formula, works similar to that formula in the dynamic case. You can set a value to a parameter, and when it says parameter there, the which parameter to set the formula value to, it's talking about parameters over here, which I can bring up this blue bar that we were looking at the settings again by just clicking on the white space, essentially. And I can define here parameters. So say I want to do a parameter of type lookup. I'll say call it account. Give it a title, a code, and then the lookup is going to reference the object accounts. These parameters can be referenced by any one of these, or like one of the elements. So if I do an add element, I want to do like add to, or add a new account that's connected, or a new record that's connected to an account, the add can reference my essentially global parameter here that it's available to any one of these pieces. You also need these kinds of parameters if, say, you want the process to run from a section page, like say learning material, we want to send an email in regards to that specific learning material record. You have to have a parameter that is learning material. And then when we go back to the edit page, which I'll make a connection to show you, say learning material, you have to tell it which record you're working with. You want to work with one and only one record, you have to give a way to tell Creatio that's the one I want. And so if I do this, call this send email, I'm going to delete the formula element because this is right now hanging out in its own. It's not on the process flow, and so therefore it won't abide by the start and end flow. Really, I don't wanted another word, but my brain didn't give me one. So send material email. I'm just gonna save this, and then I should probably put an email element on it. Just do send email. I don't have value that I want to do. I'm going to mail to current user contact, which is me. I'm going to do a template message and just pick one of these really. Link for password recovery, just as a example. And then because I want the page to pop to show you, I'm going to do it manually. I could send it automatically off criteria, like say we were storing password expires on a certain day, and we wanted it to the Creatio to send an alert at the beginning of the day that anybody whose passwords expired, here's a link for recovery. Something along those lines. You could do it. You could start the process on the timer, and you could send automatically instead. But so it's successfully saved. I'm going to go back to learning material, and I want to add the button to our material page. So I want to have like a little button around here that I can click to send this. I'm going to open my editor. And I'm going to go down to my components. I'm going to add a button, which I'm going to stick in here with the add tag, just as a grouping. So the button needs a name, so I can do like send email. There's a couple of styles I can do. Primary, make it blue. You could do a focus, which should make it green. And then warnings red. But I'll do primary for now. I can change the size of it if I wanted to. But the important one that we need is an action. I could make this open a new record, save page changes, things like that. But the one I want is run process. And then run process. Which process do I want to run? I want to run the one we just made. Send material email. And then when I connect the process like that, it's going to ask how to run the process. I can run it regardless of page. So if you just wanted to like refresh all learning material records, you just do that regardless of the page, because you're just doing it off of database criteria rather than I specifically handed a record I want to refresh, because I'm refreshing all of them. But if I want to do it for this specific record, I changed it for the selected page, and then it's going to ask how process parameter where the record is passed. Meaning it's just like, how do I know which learning material I should work with? And I just go to my parameters. You see the two that I set up are available, and I just say learning material. That's the one you care about. And Creatio is able to know because I defined the lookup on the process as being of learning material, and that this page is learning material. Creatio is able to handle the rest behind the scenes. It's not, it's able to tell we're on a learning material page, and that's how you want it to connect. You can save it. And let's refresh the page. And then now my button's here, and I can click it, and I should get an email screen. So I get the email page. It's filled in that template I provided. I would just have to say what email I want to send from, which I don't have any emails connected, but my process is up and running. Real quick, back to our process before we run out of time, if I can remember which tab it is. The remaining elements in here. So these are all database ones. I recommend building a process and trying them out. There's change access rights. You can process file, which is for working with printable reports, which we'll look at in a later course. You can call web services. There's some ML. If you have scripting experience, you can put in script tasks. It'll run in C# to provide a little bit more of a like custom functionality if you want to set it up. There's find and merge duplicates, or you can have sub processes. So essentially, this is good. It starts to get a little bit inception-y with several different levels, but you can define a sub process that does a specific function that then if you build it in a way that you can reuse it and essentially pass in the pieces that will do that function, you can have a bigger group, like a bigger process, call the sub process and hand in maybe like 50 records that you want to do the same function for each of those 50 records. The sub process can then iterate through them. The green button here is your starts. So if you wanted several criteria for a start, you could do like a signal start up here for if a record is added. and then another signal for record is modified, something like that. You can click this gear. When you click on any element, you'll see this little like pop-up window for a delete. You can pick some of the other elements from here, or you can change setting, which will usually ask you to pick from similar types. So like the term, like these are all starts or ends. So you can choose to say, actually, I want this to be a start signal, like a start timer element rather than a start signal element. The oranges, I won't go too much into. Those are waits and throw signals. I don't use them a ton. There's terminates. The terminate is a terminate. There isn't really anything fancy to it. Your process has to have a terminate at the end. And then the diamonds here, there are gateways for you to do logic. And I'd definitely say to go look on the Academy to read about them, play around with them. The gateways have different logic that will entail how they work. So an exclusive gateway, the one I got here that you can see, exclusive gateway or is an either or. It's if this true, do this, else do this other thing. Or maybe there's three options. If this, do that. If this, do that. If this, do that. And it'll do one of the three options you gave it. There's the inclusive gateway, which is still or, but this is if one thing is true, it will do it. And then if another thing is true, it will do both, essentially. So rather than only one thing can be true, more things can be true, and it'll do whichever is true. And then the parallel gateways for doing things side by side. So if you want to do two things in a branch and have both run, it's an and this one's most useful for if you need to do a branch that say you want to do like one user task at the top that's like send approval. I'm trying to do this really quick because we're running out of time. But say you want to send 2 approvals and you want to be able to run functionality on if you've got one manager that's getting an approval on the top and then another manager is getting approval on the bottom. You don't want to disregard the other manager's approval. So you have the parallel, say to Creatio functionally like a stop sign, and it'll wait. But if the first approval is done, it'll stop. And rather than advancing right on to the terminate, it'll wait until the other approval's done. Well, I think that's the quick run through on processes and dynamic cases. And we're running out of time today. So just, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Does anybody have any questions before we call it for the day? Yes, Francine.
Quick question. I want to use a parallel, two parallel components there. Like say you want multiple people to get the approval, but you want it to end when one of the parties approves and not wait for the other people. Would you still use a parallel gateway?
So I would use the parallel gateway at the beginning to, oh, that's not a parallel, the parallel and say that I would do it at the beginning here to say I want to trigger both elements. But then at the end where this functions like a stop sign, I would do, really you could just flow right on that. You don't need a gateway here. They can just both connect to the terminate, and Creatio will, whichever one's done first, will move right on and head towards the terminate. Because the biggest problem I run into is that the process will terminate for everybody if one approval is finished, and so the other person will just get an alert that their approval was canceled and just be like, "What? Why?"
Right. Great. Okay. Thanks so much.
All right. Any other questions? No. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. I'm gonna wrap up the screen share. And tomorrow, I think we're going to look at, I think employees and security. We'll start looking at permissions and how you can control what users can see and do things. So, hope to see everybody tomorrow that can make it, but thank you for coming.